campaign back in the day. I mean, he was writing op-eds to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution 40 years ago, complaining about the Democrat machine in Fulton County. And this is before the events of 2020, well before. So there's always been some margin of cheating. The Romney campaign organized an apparatus called Orca in 2012 to take it on, and in true Romney fashion, it did nothing. So what we have now, though, is I don't know what the margin of cheating is anymore. I mean, we had Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan was up by 1 point in the final Real Clear Politics polling average in the 2022 midterms. She won by 10. I mean, Donald Trump just absolutely broke the Real Clear Politics polling average in the 2020 election. So I don't know what the margins of cheating are anymore. To be fair to Maricopa County, Trump is polling way ahead of where he was the last 2 times he ran. And so they clearly don't know how many votes they're going to need to count here. You know, it's going to take a little bit longer to come up with that number, you know. So I need to see us beat that machinery. And until I see it, I'm not going to be confident. But on the other matters, the boxes we used to check, before 2020, I'm very confident.
So we want to get into some of those details in a minute. But when you look at the big picture, right, this is my problem, and I'm curious if you feel the same way. Like you said, every normal measure, right, it seems fine, and it almost makes me feel like I'm back in normal political time. I haven't felt this way, Steve, for years, right? And I don't believe it. I don't believe the feeling, but because I feel like
I don't believe my own hype. No, I don't believe my own hype.
No,
yes.
I don't believe the feeling. But the feeling is, Kamala's falling apart. We can just see we're going to drift in the presidency. Everyone I know is measuring the drapes already and squabbling about what positions they'll get. And it's just going to go back and everything's going to be fine. And then, of course, my reason is telling me, no, all the psychos who are still in charge, who have proven they're willing to do anything for the last 8 years. And this could be a very protracted battle, et cetera, et cetera. So does that resonate with you? And how do you kind of feel about this?
I don't know. 100% resonates, Matt. I don't know. I've never had to analyze, quantify that kind of factor. The closest I can come to it, I love my sports analogies, but when I was a kid and you went to play Gene Cady at Purdue or Bob Knight at Indiana, the referees were so intimidated by those two coaches in those environments. You just knew going in that you had to be 8 to 10 points better than Indiana and Purdue to win a game in those arenas. Chances are they were going to attempt more free throws than you were going to make. All right. And they were going to get every judgment call. So you just kind of knew that, and that was just kind of a sunk cost of being a fan of 1980s era Big Ten basketball. You just kind of knew that. And that's kind of what I think, analyzing this. I mean, our own Blaze original we did earlier this year with Sarah Gonzalez about my former home state of Michigan. I mean, when she went up there, and I texted her after I watched the advanced version or copy of that before it went live. And I said, I'm in my corner of my man cave where I'm at right now, and I'm cutting myself. All right. I mean, it's a crime in Michigan to report voter fraud. Okay. So I don't know how we could not. I mean, I screamed about this the last few years, and I'm a purist, and I can't be pleased, and I won't unite, and this and that. I just want to friggin' win, all right? And I just saw we did nothing for 4 years other than release no Kraken, stop no steals, and a lot of people built massive engagement armies and farms going on and on and on about what they have over there. But when I looked at the midterm or the post-midterm special election and off-year elections, Matt, we got freaking killed. Mm-hmm. They were taking plus 20 Trump Ohio congressional districts in special elections and losing them by 8. Okay. So the one thing I am confident about because I don't think we can make a lot of comparisons or conclusions about the early voting because we have no control group. You can't compare anything to 2020 when almost everybody was voting mail-in around the country. So we don't know what any of these numbers mean. But the one thing I am heartened to hear, and even Daniel Horowitz backed me up on this, so now I know it's okay to be positive, okay? The one thing I am heartened to see is that we got killed by their ballot harvesting machinery in these off-year special elections. So at the very least, our energy level is where it needs to be, given how well we're performing in this early voting. Even if we're cannibalizing the people that would have voted, it still means, though, that they're showing up to vote. So we've established there's going to be a floor. And even a couple of months ago, I wasn't so sure about that. So that's at least a starting spot.
Well, as a Republican, I know, Steve, you just want to go out there and say scoreboard. That's the win that you want to go see. But when you're looking at the different sides of what we have right now, right? Maricopa County saying it could take 13 days to count ballots. And then you were mentioning the numbers. Well, in Miami-Dade County right now, Republicans are plus 16 this morning. So where do you cut the knife between those two fractions of headlines that we're seeing right now?
I think even if you're trying to do this honestly, and I'm not sure how many people left are, okay, but even if you're trying to do this honestly, Jill, I think the 2020 election broke voter rolls all over the country. Just you know me long enough to know I think Quinnipiac sucks as a pollster. Okay, but let me use them as an example. So they did some polling of Michigan 3 weeks ago. They had Trump +1. Today they come out. They've got Kamala +3. The only difference being in the first Trump poll, it was Republicans R +1. In this poll, it's D +4. Both of those scenarios are very plausible. And I think that even if you're trying to do it honestly, we really don't know who's going to turn out because we don't have mass mail-in voting everywhere anymore. We've actually won a few decisions here late in several key states around the country, like Pennsylvania and Georgia, clamping down on their ability just to conjure, ballots. So if you just adjust a point or two of turnout of the overall electorate, let alone a couple of subgroups here or there, you can come up with a vastly different outcome, even if you're trying to do it honestly. I also think we're seeing a bit of a realignment here. I do think we are seeing the Republican Party continue to decline as it has under Trump with white college graduates. On the other hand, I do think there is a very real possibility, and you know how much I will pan that we clickbait our boomer audiences that are rightly tired of being called racist all these years. But I do think both in terms of vibes and in the data, it is very possible Donald Trump's going to get a record number of Hispanic men and black men. And in that case, that's also something that if it manifests itself, a poll would be a leading indicator to claim it's possible, but probably wouldn't be able to actually nail what that would actually be. And that could move an electorate a few places there too. And so if you've got some demographic realignment, as well as a pollster that makes it really hard to kind of frame and weight your electorate all the more, because you're already going against conventional wisdoms by giving Kamala more white college graduates than a Democrat has typically gotten, and giving Trump more Hispanic and black males than a Republican has.
Well, Steve, you talk about realignment. Well, Tulsi Gabbard joined the Republican Party officially last night. Let's take a look.
It is because of my love for our country, and specifically because of the leadership that President Trump has brought to transform the Republican Party and bring it back to the party of the people and the party of peace, that I'm proud to stand here with you today, President Trump, and announce that I'm joining the Republican Party.
Steve, we have about 60 seconds left. What does this mean for the Republican Party and just that realignment that is going on right now?
I think it means more for Trump and his movement. And I think the one thing that's happened this cycle that has never happened before is Trump has been polling ahead of the Republican Party the entire time, when previously he polled and finished behind it. And I think you're seeing now he is expanding his coalition, whether it's RFK Jr., Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, that essentially Donald Trump's movement represents 1980s, 1990s New York City, and versus 2024 San Francisco and Minneapolis. Now, what it means after this election for the GOP, Jill, remains to be seen. But it's very clear that Trump's movement has expanded its coalition.
Steve Deace, thanks so much for joining us.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
There you go. A good Republican take there from Deace to get us started off with. There's 13 days left now until the big event.
Yeah, I feel like that was a sanity check. No one's going crazy. We all see the similar things. I think that the cautious optimism, of course, is great. One thing that I think we should really think about, I was talking to a couple of people on a chat group about, is the difference this time, if this is protracted, and messy and close, is that there is Elon Musk in an existential crisis where he's got to win, who has resources, and I think can lead and push better than the Republican Party usually can.
Well, that's interesting, because when we come back, Chris Bedford is going to outline Kamala Harris's scare tactics. Don't go anywhere. As we move towards the holiday season, it's the perfect time to say goodbye to those uncomfortable sheets that you've been sleeping on for years and get yourself Cozy Earth's best-selling bamboo sheet set. Now, I have them and I love them, and I can say that I've had them for a few months now, and they're the best sheets that I've ever owned, and they get softer every single time I wash them. Cozy Earth, it's right there in the name. They want to turn your personal space into a sanctuary. And this is where you're going to come and escape all the chaos of daily life and find the perfect place to unwind and find renewal. And they make a perfect gift for the holiday season. And just in case you're on the fence, all of Cozy Earth's products come with a 100-night sleep trial. So if you're not completely in love with them after more than 3 months, you can still return them for a full refund. So wrap the ones that you love in luxury with Cozy Earth. Visit CozyEarth.com/Jill and use my exclusive 40% off code Jill to give the gift of luxury this holiday season. It's CozyEarth.com/Jill. If you get a post-purchase survey, say that you heard about Cozy Earth from Blaze News Tonight and Jill Savage. Republicans may risk overconfidence this election, but are Democrats risking disaster? That's what senior political editor Chris Bedford wrote in his latest Beltway brief, and he joins us now. So, Chris, how are the Democrats trying to avoid failure right now?
I've got a couple different kind of things going on, and some of it is just coping, and some of it's seething. The first ones, I guess, we'll start with some of the efforts to get out the vote. Right now, they're basically telling black voters that they have a racial duty to vote for Kamala Harris, black men in particular. Barack Obama, who's launched when he was president, my brother's keeper, didn't have a very good relationship with his own brother. He's kind of positioned himself as a self-styled dad to America's black men. That feeling doesn't seem to quite be reciprocated. But he went out in the campaign show. He spent the last 2 weeks just chastising people. How dare they give up on their duty as black men to vote for Kamala Harris? It's not going over that well, not even with liberal media. And at the same time, apparently, white people also have a racial duty to vote for Kamala Harris. Basically, everyone's got a racial duty to vote for Kamala Harris. The arc of history is long, but it is rainbow colored, and it bends toward Democratic politicians, and you're on the wrong side of it if you don't get with the program. I don't know how much that's working either. Maybe a little bit with white women, but if you turn on the TV and you're not watching BlazeTV or watching one of the bad programs, one of the bad channels, your chances in 24 hours of hearing a pundit go out and say something awful about white people, that white people owe this, white people should be held accountable, white people aren't pulling their weight on Kamala Harris, and you never, ever, ever see a pundit or an anchor push back on this. You don't see newspaper editors push back on it. When the Nation, once an actually kind of impressive publication with a lot of good literature in it, always liberal-leaning, when the Nation's publishing pieces by apparent self-styled intellectuals about the failure of mediocre white people to keep our country from going toward fascism, well, maybe there's just a little bit of animus creeping into the Democrats' message. And then, of course, the last one's my favorite. That is the theory that's being floated by former Republican Representative Barbara Comstock and Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney's daughter, that there is a quiet liberal voter out there, a quiet Democrat. Over the last 20 years, I have seen the "This is not normal" bumper stickers. I've lived in neighborhoods where every house had a rainbow flag, except for maybe mine and one other. I've lived in neighborhoods where almost every house had the "In this house we believe" signs, which was mostly about how you're not welcome in that house. Everyone's welcome except for half of the country that is Christian and Republican. And then, you of course, you remember the pink hats. They had a pretty inappropriate name. All the rich women who flew in from Taos and flew in from California to Hillary Clinton's inauguration, they had non-refundable tickets. They ended up forming the Women's March because there was no President Hillary Clinton. They wore these disgusting hats. You see the mobs screaming at people having brunch in the streets about George Floyd this, or Kamala Harris, or Barack Obama that. I just haven't met this quiet liberal voter. Apparently, there's legions of them out there, but the quiet Democrat seems to be something from at least more than 20 years ago.
Chris, we want to talk about a few more examples of what's happening now. But before we get there, in listening to you talk, let's steelman this for them. the argument would be something like, am I right or wrong? I could be wrong about this. Their argument is we need to get our base out, right? So we're going to say all the things that are going to make sure that all of our people get out there. I mean, that's the only conceivable argument I could see for some of this, that we're going to go back to the same tropes. No, you have to do this because of the color of your skin, and we need all those people to get out there. Is that accurate? I mean,
Yeah, I think so. And that's what we're seeing right now. You're seeing this weird sequel. Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic wrote another piece that's kind of basically the same thing. All these anonymous sources, Trump disparaging the troops and this and that. There's a bunch of, once again, on the record sources saying it's not true. You've got General Kelly, who in the past has claimed, Donald Trump has a flippant point of view. He talks and jokes. He says crazy things. He likes to get a rise out of people. And for years, General Kelly's been saying, well, Donald Trump said Hitler had good generals or this or that. Who knows if that was actually real? Who knows if it was certainly said as a joke if it was real. But now that's getting picked up. And so on the one hand, you want to sit back and wonder, why is Vice President Kamala Harris holding a campaign speech from the vice presidential house with the vice presidential seal, where she calls Donald Trump Hitler and a Nazi, and Jeffrey Goldberg says, yeah, he hates the troops? None of this worked 4 years ago. None of this worked 8 years ago. No one's changed their mind really since then. The Democrats calling Donald Trump Hitler seems like it's tried. It's not going to change anyone. But it is exactly what you're talking about there, Matt, which is I think there's a depression in the ranks amongst Democratic voters. They're not feeling too good. They're not feeling confident. They're not liking their team. They're not feeling the same motivation of we hate Donald Trump that they may have in the past. And the Democrats are going to go full bore to be like, hey, just a reminder, all you liberal voters out there, all you quiet Democrats, Donald Trump is literally Hitler. So you need to go out there and vote. And it's kind of a driving out of the base.
Exactly. I want to get your thoughts quickly on a couple of sound bites that we have, because we have Joe Biden out there saying that Donald Trump should be locked up. First, let's go ahead and listen to that.
So I know this sounds bizarre. It sounds like if I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up. Politically lock him up.
I'm old enough to remember when that was dangerous, when Trump was saying that, Bedford.
Yeah, and this is more awesome Joe Biden just showing up, making cameo appearances. He's a character from the past now. I mean, he's still president. He's still alive. It's great to see. And he shows up on the campaign trail and just lobs bombs here and there, causes trouble. I laughed a little bit at that. The Democrats have been trying to lock up Donald Trump now for years. They're not going to stop trying to lock him up. But at the same time, Kamala Harris's campaign was so upset by this that they immediately had campaign staff reaching out to reporters saying it's not helpful, saying that Joe Biden doesn't know what he's talking about. So she may be out there saying there's no difference between him and me. There's no light. We are one and the same. We are close allies. But her campaign staff know that this is kind of problematic language, and they're talking to reporters, attacking the sitting Democratic president.
Well, her campaign staff might also have an issue with something else that she said. She went on Telemundo, and she went out there and said that she supports mass amnesty for illegal immigrants. Listen.
Right now, we're talking about border security, and there's no Democrat talking about pathway to citizenship, an immigration relief, and the benefits that migrants bring to this country.
Oh, but there's no question that migrants bring. America is a country that was built in part by immigrants.
But people are concerned about their TPS, their DACA, we're talking about mass deportations.
I'm not talking about.
What do you stand on mass deportations? What's your stand there?
We need smart, humane immigration policy in America that includes a pathway to citizenship.
You can't tell me she even believes what she just said there. You can tell the way that she's answering that question, Chris.
What amazed me about the interview is that it seemed like she was the English second language speaker in it. The interviewer, despite a thick accent, had such a better grasp of the language. She was almost just trying to search for what is the word for the, what is the word for is. And at the end, she kind of just fell back on policies that she's been comfortable with her entire life. Now, pathway to citizenship is something that Democrats and Republicans for about over 20 years, 50 years, have been trying to push from time to time. And it is exactly what you say. It is a word for mass amnesty. It is a word for our phrase for the over 10 million, maybe closer to 20 million illegal immigrants living in this country to become U.S. citizens. It is a Democrat catch-all. It's a promise that's always been made. They snookered Ronald Reagan with it back in the day, saying we're going to do this amnesty in exchange for border security. The border security never came. They're still trying it, and they're still trying to push that. But, you know, I love it, at least. There's an honest Democratic Party for once. We've had it now for about 8 years in this country. I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez really ushered it in. Democrats who are honest about what they intend to do.
Muy bien, Senior Bedford. We'll catch you tomorrow.
Can't wait.
And Peterson, it's just one of those things where they are going back, as Chris is saying, they're basically going to the greatest hits of the Democratic playbook, and Trump is Hitler and immigration. They're just trying to throw everything out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I can feel the energy dying. I mean, you know, I haven't heard General Kelly's name in a long time. The last time I saw him in person, I happened to be in the White House, and he marched into a room, opened the door, and looked around and just kind of mumbled, "Where's Meadows?" And and like walked away, you know, sort of haunting. He wasn't happy there then. He wasn't supporting the president. And so these are like ghosts of the last few years coming back. But, you know, they're trying to resurrect them, and they're having a big seance right now. Literally Hitler, literally Hitler, literally Hitler. So we'll see what happens.
Well, when we come back, this is going to be very interesting for this conversation, because our next guest will arm you with the knowledge that you need to combat propaganda. Just ahead. You don't have to wait until November to vote. You can vote every single day with your dollar at goodranchers.com. You can make a powerful choice for the voting of American meat to support the American agriculture and make your voice heard for transparency in our food, because Good Ranchers sources all of their meat exclusively from American farms, which not only supports local ranchers, but you also ensure that you receive high quality American raised meat without the antibiotics, the hormones, and the seed oils. And by shopping at goodranchers.com, you're making a statement about the kind of values that you stand for. It's quality and hard work and dedication to the American tradition. And right now, Good Ranchers is having a presidential promo. So for a limited time, you can get a free add-on for 4 years. And that means when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you get to decide if you want extra plain chicken breast, Angus ground beef, apple smoked with bacon, or wild-caught salmon in your order for 4 years. It's the perfect way to ensure that you have high-quality American meat in your kitchen, and every cut is pre-trimmed and individually packed, so it makes your life easier. There's no more messy meal prep. There's no wasted food because of freezer burn or poor storage packaging. Good Ranchers helps you get the most flavor and value out of every ounce of meat that you buy, and in this economy, that matters more each day. So don't miss out. Use my code Jill to claim this presidential promo worth over $1,200 and claim $25 off your first box, plus free express shipping, and bring 100% American meat to your family meals until 2028. It's goodranchers.com, code Jill. Goodranchers.com, American meat delivered.
Every day, powerful forces manipulate what you see, what you think, and what you believe. News, television, social media, your very thoughts and feelings are controlled now by corporate elites, politicians, and the tech giants. Think you have escaped their reach? No, you haven't, because no one can.
That's the trailer for Glenn Beck's latest book, Propaganda Wars. And here to discuss with us is the co-author of the book and Heartland Institute Senior Fellow, Justin Haskins. So, Justin, just break this down. Propaganda Wars, what is it? How did this book come to be?
Yeah, so the genesis of this book was about a year ago. We're looking ahead to this exact moment in time, and we said, okay, what is the thing that everyone's going to be talking about? It's going to be the election. The last two presidential elections have been the biggest propaganda events in modern American history, to be sure. Lots of division has resulted from these things, questions about the validity of elections, all kinds of crazy stuff. And we saw the emerging technologies that were coming with AI and deep fakes and social media algorithms and all this stuff, and how those things are going to create even more problems into the future. We said we need to warn people about this, and we need to provide them with the ability to be able to know what's real and what isn't real, what they can trust, what they can't. When it's time to just stop and say, I don't know if this is true, and that's okay that I don't know. I'm going to wait. And so Propaganda Wars is unlike any book that Glenn and I have done together. It gives people actual tools that they can apply when they watch the news to know when they should trust something, when they shouldn't trust something. And then we take the, in addition to that, we provide a whole bunch of information about what we consider to be sort of the emerging issues that we're most concerned about, like election-related issues, foreign influence in American society, emerging technologies, and other things. So you're going to learn something if you get Propaganda Wars. I assure you of that. It is an incredible book. Glenn and I worked really hard on it, and I'm excited for people to read it.
I love the fact that there's this practical angle to it. So important. So much of what we want to do here with Align and some of the new verticals is talk more about how to do things, practical stuff that people can use. But to talk a little bit more about the problem, because you guys used to talk about the propaganda industrial complex. Yeah. Which is a great phrase. I think all of us, when we hear it, go, I think I know what that is. But it really is a complicated system at this point.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah, what's incredible is the more research we did on it, the more complicated the issue became. And at first, I think what a lot of people imagine is, well, it's the media. We can't trust what the mainstream media is telling us, and that's what the propaganda industrial complex is. Or maybe it's the media and government. But it's actually much deeper than that. What a lot of people don't realize is that so much of what goes on in our world today has been dreamed up by nonprofits, think tanks, various groups of people at the United Nations, working hand in hand with corporations and government entities, coming up with wargaming strategies. And this has been going on for years and years and years on all kinds of incredible issues. And we outlined so many of those in the book. One of the most incredible ones that's relative to the upcoming election is the left has been wargaming out a possible deep fake election crisis. What do we do if there's a deep fake election crisis that benefits Donald Trump, that was perpetrated by the Russians? They've got it all the way down to the details of this. What do we do? How do we handle it? And the people who are involved are all incredibly far left-wing, anti-Trump people. They've created a network of so-called election experts. They've gone throughout the country to local election officials and said, if there's a deepfake crisis, you can come to us. You can trust us. We'll give you the truth. And one of the main players behind this is a guy named Miles Taylor. This is a guy who worked in the Trump administration. And while he was in the Trump administration, high level in the Department of Homeland Security, he wrote an anonymous op-ed famously for the New York Times saying he was the head of the resistance inside the Trump administration. And then he wrote a book about it. And then he wrote another book about it. And then finally acknowledged it was him all along. This is the guy who local election officials, people like that, are going to go to get an unbiased take. This is the kind of thing that we break down in the book. It is absolutely incredible what the left has done. The infrastructure is amazing, and we need to be able to fight back against it by knowing what's real and what isn't. We can't trust the experts. The experts are not telling the truth anymore. And so we have to become our own experts in our own lives.
So there's so much out there, but give us just a little piece, because we talk about all the misinformation. There's so much information out there right now. So how are you supposed to figure out what's true and what's not?
Yeah, so what we did is provide people with a step-by-step guide. We give them actual tests that you can run news stories through or pieces of information. So one example, one of the most basic but important examples, is the original source test. So when you read something in the news, you see a clip of something, don't just, especially if it's important, don't just assume that whoever the media outlet is giving it to you is being accurate or truthful about it. Go actually look at the quote in context. And the best example of this is the very fine people thing that we're hearing about constantly all the time from Donald Trump.
And hedge fund manager Bill Ackman went on CNBC this morning and he said, it took me all of 2 minutes. I used to be a guy that believed that, and it took me 2 minutes to say, oh, this wasn't what he was saying at all. He was arguing the other way.
Exactly. Go to the original source. And a lot of the misinformation just really comes down to that one simple thing. And then we have a whole bunch of other tests to know whether you can trust someone and whether you should believe what they're telling you, or if you need to hold them to a higher standard. One of them is called What is a Woman Test. And the idea behind this is if they can't tell you what a woman is, then you can't trust that they're being honest with you about anything else.
That's such a good test.
Really simple things that people can do in their lives. And while it might sound kind of basic, when you actually run it through controversial stories that have come up, it almost always works. And so I urge people to get Propaganda Wars, go through this with your family, teach them how to know whether something is real or not real, learn about what's coming our way in the upcoming election, and be prepared, because this could be, hopefully it won't be, but could be a crisis event, and people need to be ready for it.
Where can people get the book, Justin?
Well, they can get the book anywhere that books are sold at this point in time. Amazon.com, of course. Go to glensnewbook.com, and that will redirect you right to the perfect place.
I love that he now has a website that is just so easy. glensnewbook.com. Justin, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Of course.
When we come back, a pro-gun control Democrat injures a reporter, I should say, at a shooting range. We'll have so much more on that campaign event and where it went wrong up next. And we know that you can't trust propaganda wars. So what we're doing here for election night, it's going to be about so much more than just politics. We know everybody wants secure borders. We want to make sure that we are protecting our communities and ensuring that when disaster strikes, we have a government that actually shows up for the people. So first and foremost, on election day, we need you to go vote. But on election night, you're going to want to be a member of Blaze TV so you can join me and everybody else at Blaze TV for our coverage of the 2024 presidential election, because we're at a crossroads right now. The future of our nation is being decided in real time, and this is your chance to be a part of something amazing. This election night, Blaze TV is going to have boots on the ground across the country with our correspondents delivering the pulse of the night straight from where the action is happening. All you have to do is subscribe, and you can experience this pivotal night with us here at Blaze TV. Because we speak the truth. There's not going to be any spin, any filters, any propaganda wars going on here at Blaze TV. It's just going to be real. We're going to have real talk, breaking down what's happening in real time. And we'd like to have you join us. So go to blazeelection.com/BNT and get $40 off. That's it. It's blazeelection.com/BNT for $40 off.
Yeah, thank you. It's got a knife, you cut it short when you need it.
Democrat Missouri Senate candidate Lucas Kunce recently held a sport shooting campaign event alongside former Congressman Adam Kinzinger. However, the event ended in bloodshed when a bullet fragment struck a reporter in the arm. Here to discuss this is Blaze News reporter Joe MacKinnon, who recently wrote up this story for theblaze.com. So Joe, take us through this. Like, what happened at this event?
Well, a little bit of background. As you can remember earlier this month, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz tried his hand at luring some moderates and Republicans with affinities for the Second Amendment over with a hunting photo op, and that did not go very well. He didn't hit anything, though he talked a big game. And so we have Lucas over here, who's trying to unseat Josh Hawley. He went to a shooting range, which, as I'll note in a moment, was set up rather poorly, and he ended up wounding a member of the Fourth Estate, not grievously, but enough to generate a significant spurt of blood. And so, as you can imagine, a lot of people thought this was particularly funny because the reporter, Ryan Gamboa of, KSHB TV, he's fine, but people noted that Kunce, I'm saying that because the alternate pronunciation, I'm not sure is right for broadcast. He's a gun control activist. He touts himself as something of a gun security expert, and he's volunteered his services online in the past. And well, I don't think this could have gone any worse.
Joe, I mean, it really is remarkable that because he just comes after the Walls, right, shotgun incident when he's trying to he's loading a gun. You're looking at this going, what is even happening here? Why are you doing this to yourself? Why is there a camera there? Why isn't there like one adult in the room going, you know what, this isn't going to look good for us, just purely for that reason? And in this case, I mean, you couldn't write this into, a conservative movie. What's the fallout here? Because it's laughable, it's hilarious. Every detail of this is like a delicious satire, from being a gun control advocate to shooting at whatever 13 feet away into steel. Like my 12-year-old would know not to do what happened. What these men were engaged in. Never mind Kinzinger and supposedly his background. So in any event, I mean the fallout so far enlighten us, because I know that the candidate tried to make light of this on Twitter and sort of joke about it. Do you think that's a wise move? And what's happening? What's the fallout?
I don't think it's wise at all. To say it's a good day at the range when someone had to go to the hospital, probably not prudent or ill-advised, especially with the timing. You want to probably wait for the medical report to come in. But Hawley made, he had a field day with this, really. He asked whether Kamala Harris would condemn this latest instance of gun violence. And he posted several memes, as many others, including myself, did. Sean Davis over at the Federalist, he noted the various safety concerns with the setup. There was explosive powder downrange. The photojournalist was, in the way of danger. And then there was also the matter of Kinzinger using a high-powered scope to fire at steel targets about 5 to 7 yards away. So the whole thing was just a disaster. I think impressive, because I doubt anyone thought Waltz could be outdone. And it was curious. AP admitted that this was an attempt to, again, lure Republican voters and potential moderate undecideds. And so this paralleled very much Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney's Potemkin town hall, which was also a nightmare. So I think the Waltz appeal, the Harris appeal, and now this, all just total gong shows.
Well, you have another piece on theblaze.com, and you wrote about a British Army vet who was found guilty for praying silently outside an abortion clinic. And we actually have a few more of these stories. There was a Texas couple that was sentenced to years of prison because they were praying outside of the Capitol on January 6th. And then a 75-year-old who was outside D.C. who was actually praying in front of an abortion clinic back in 2020. So when you look at this, how is silent prayer being criminalized?
Well, that's an important distinction, silent prayer. So in the two American instances, it was out loud. But in this case, we're all tiring of having George Orwell being proven right, but it's literally a thought crime. This individual, Adam Smith Connor, who is a veteran, he spent 2 decades in the Army Reserve and did a tour in Afghanistan, probably figured that he had earned the right to express himself, or the opportunity to exercise his basic rights in the so-called birthplace of free speech. But he found out the hard way that you cannot, let me rephrase, silent prayer is a criminal act. About 23 years ago, he's 51 now with 2 kids, and I should say 3, but about 23 years ago, he took his ex-girlfriend to get an abortion, and he paid for it. And years later, he realized, the moral gravity of what he had done, and he wanted to atone for the sin of killing his son. And so he's been praying a great deal in private and elsewhere. And he figured in 2022, on November 24th, that he would go to one of these abattoirs, which the British euphemistically refer to as British Pregnancy Advisor Service clinics. And he, out of eyesight of this, with his back turned, he bowed his head, clasped his hands, and said a prayer for his son, for his dead son. And he was accosted by 2 cops, a bulldoggish looking man and a bulldoggish looking woman. And the female cop asked him, and let me get the quote precise. What is the nature of your prayer? And over the course of this protracted conversation, they teased up the fact that he was indeed praying for his son. And so this apparently ran afoul of the Antisocial Behavior Crime and Policing Act. Because at the time, there was about 5 of these censorship buffer zones around abortion clinics. And this is what's prohibited. Protest in general, but graphic, verbal, or written means, prayer or counseling are also verboten. And so he was praying. Now, praying silently, mind you, but that was still enough to run afoul of the law. And so they cited him. He tried to fight it. And just days ago, he was convicted for signaling disapproval silently in prayer to the abortion regime, having prayed for his dead son. And he now has to pay about $12,000 in prosecutor's fees. Miriam Cates, a former parliamentarian, noted that it costs about $100,000 to prosecute this case. So resources are stretched thin, but still the British regime has the time and the patience to put someone through the ringer for a thought crime. So it's, again, proving Orwell right. And this is not a lone case. As you mentioned, we have similar things here in North America, but in the UK, Isabel Vaughan Spruce was similarly arrested on 2 occasions, once in November 2022 and once, I believe it was March 2023, for silent prayer outside one of these clinics. And what's particularly egregious is at the end of this month, so then there was about 5 of these censorship zones. At the end of this month, it will be universal. Every clinic, every one of these abortion clinics in England and Wales will have these buffer zones where within 150 meters, you cannot pray. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. And Joe, it's such a chilling story. I really just thank you for coming on the show and shedding some light on this today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And Matthew, it's one of those things where I wish that it was just over in the UK, but it's here in America as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to realize how this is gradually moving, right? I mean, so it starts with, well, this is part of a protest because it's abortion. Well, this is tied to some other things you're doing over here, right? It's tied to the protest. But as you can hear, they have an actual zone, a prayer-free zone, right? Where even spiritually, inside of your soul, you are not allowed to think those thoughts. And that is what's coming here if we don't stop what's going on.
We absolutely need to do that. And when we come back, we'll talk about that a little bit more and wrap up the show next. Volatility will increase. It's what Matthew Peterson likes to say all the time. And we know that that's going to continue as we get closer and closer to the election cycle. But I thought it was interesting, Steve Deace is like, well, what's the margin of cheating that we're going to need? And Justin Haskins comes through and says, here's all the propaganda wars that everybody is laying out for you.
Oh, yeah. And so they kind of give you the landscape, right?
Yeah.
And it is very interesting. Right now, I had a lunch with someone who made this point and said it was great. I mean, I haven't heard anyone say this. Right now feels like, the calm before the storm, right? It's like that moment where all of a sudden everything's quiet. And it's eerily quiet in a way, even though, the news cycle is going on. They're repeating the same mantras. The bottom is falling out for Kamala. The momentum is in Trump's favor. But we know, right, all the kind of craziness that could, unfold after that. And look, if there's no craziness, great, right? But we're in this strange kind of moment right now. It's an exciting time to be alive.
But Matthew, I don't know if you know this or not. Trump is Hitler.
Yes.
And Obama came out yesterday and he was saying, I don't understand why this is so toxic, why we're so divided. And then today you get Kamala Harris, KJP. They're all like, oh, yeah, Trump is Hitler.
Oh, yeah. No, so Obama's great with this, right? Because he gives this unity rhetoric all the time, and then also does the most divisive things you can possibly imagine in American history. I mean, I grew up in a time where it would be considered terrible form to still live in D.C. and be politically active. He thinks that's his duty, right, behind the scenes. It's terrible, the divisiveness. And the Hitler thing is interesting. They don't shy away from it. 2 assassination attempts, right? Mm-hmm. We're at the very end. They're running out of energy.
Calm our rhetoric, but only on the right.
You're Hitler. And I mean, they cannot turn away from this path. They're stuck on this path. And that's why volatility will increase, because they can't stop. They can't help themselves.
Well, I guess the men in Georgia must not have gotten the memo, because Georgia polls right now show that 28% of all men, not subdivided, not by race, 28% of all men right now are voting for Kamala Harris in Georgia.
Wow. Not a lot of dudes of any kind for
No,
Harris.
it doesn't matter if they're white dudes or not. No dudes in Georgia really are really voting for her.
This is it. I mean, people go out, get more people to vote. I mean, if there is an overwhelming collapse, right, that is the best case scenario. So let's go.
I looked at it, though, earlier. Again, the Florida numbers are pretty astonishing right now. When you can look at a Miami-Dade County and Republicans are plus 16, I don't care how early we are in early voting. That's a huge number.
Yeah, and it is indicative of real realignment, regardless of what happens in the election or how the Democrats try to fight it afterwards. There is real realignment happening, and there's no better example of that in the nation than Miami-Dade.
Absolutely. And DeSantis, we saw what he was doing, such a boss in 2020, carrying the only part of the red wave along with him. And hopefully that can just continue on for the rest of the country, because we want the wave to go over the entire country this time, you guys. We don't want it just over there in Florida. Florida had their fun in 2020. Now the rest of the country can join along. We'll be back to break all of the chaos down tomorrow night.